Order. Is there anybody courtesy of the floor? Seeing none, we'll go to review of the district attorney's personnel request.
Good afternoon. Robert Iyer from the District Attorney's Office. And I think you have before you two requests. The first being relating to county detectives, and that was initially memorialized in a memorandum from District Attorney Barada, July 12th, 2024, for the hiring of retiring Bethlehem Police Detective Bradford Jones, and then as supplemented with email communications that was forwarded, and I think also copied to your solicitor to amend that request.
Okay. Question? You never got the amendment?
Never received which memo?
So you're saying you sent a second memorandum?
There was email correspondence from the weekend that was forwarded to Danielle Mutarelli and to Mr. Spadoni. I don't know if Mr. Spadoni saw that. Okay. The essence of it, I can explain the essence of it, and the original request of July 12th was as a consequence of the pending retirement of Detective Andre Stevens and the planned hiring of retired Bethlehem Detective Bradford Jones, with a request that Detective Jones be hired at grade 25, step 07G, and that was met with response indicating that was response from Danielle Mutarelli indicating that hire at that step was not, that the county council did not have, in the judgment expressed in the email correspondence, the authority to hire a new detective at that step as a consequence of that being a union position. And the response that District Attorney Barada had forwarded in the email that I referenced, that I understand that you have not had an opportunity to see, was to amend that request with respect to Detective Jones to, in fact, amend the request so that all of the county detectives would be paid at step 7G.
Other questions? Mr. Iyer? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Giovanni. I'm wondering, in the 7 months that I have been on county council, the district attorney's office has come to county council a number of times already, asking for various salary increases, asking for different position restructures. I'm wondering, is there any way that, and I believe I asked the district attorney, I think the last time he was here, if there's any way of knowing if he's going to continue to come to county council and asking for salary increases and asking for new positions. And I believe he indicated that that likely is going to be happening at some point down the road. Is there any way we can get a plan of action from the district attorney's office in terms of what he is specifically looking to do with regard to positions and salaries, at least perhaps maybe until the end of the year? I don't know if this is possible, because I don't necessarily feel comfortable just approving salary increases, improving salary increases, improving salary increases, and new positions here and there with kind of arbitrarily. Of course, if we're prosecuting crimes, of course, in the county, I want to make sure that the district attorney's office has what it needs, but I'd like to maybe see a plan of action in the future as to where the district attorney's office wants to go in terms of hiring and restructuring with regard to the office.
And I appreciate that question, and let me respond this way. First, if you posed the question to District Attorney Barada on a prior occasion, I would first, in the first instance, defer to his answer to that. But at the same time, would certainly welcome the opportunity to address that directly with him. So at the appropriate time with County Council, we could perhaps address it more directly if it hasn't been already. That's one. Two, the point I would make with respect to, I think, just about all, if not all, of the restructuring and/or change in positions and pay that have occurred to this point and have been neutral. That is, they have not been requests beyond what was previously budgeted. And likewise, the requests that are before you today are what I would characterize as budget neutral. They are not a request for funds in addition to that which is already budgeted.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions?
Well,
Go ahead.
I just have a question about how this is laid out. So you're eliminating one, you wanted to create two, but given this memo, it looks like you're only hiring one, and you don't want to create two?
Let me
Is that
stop
correct?
for a second. Are you, and inquire, are you speaking about the ADAs or the detectives?
I only have one resolution in front of me.
Yes, I noticed that when I picked,
And it says one full-time district
Correct.
attorney, one, and the positions of two part-time district attorney ones at the pay grade RS7. And that's the only resolution I have in front of me.
I'm aware of that, and I
So
noticed.
that means that's the only action that we can take.
Yeah,
because
and
the memos don't create action.
I can't account for that. The only thing that was submitted with respect to the ADAs was likewise the memorandum. But it is two separate matters. It's one relating to the county detectives, which we've talked about, and two relating to the ADAs, which is the elimination of a single full-time position and the creation in its stead of two part-time positions.
But the detectives aren't here, so we can't, I mean,
Act
that's
on
up
it.
to you and Mr., I see that she's here and I see the correspondence, but I don't see a resolution to take action.
No,
So,
and I noticed that as well when I reviewed the agenda, that there was only a single resolution.
so are you still, like, here's the difficulty. I mean, if the correspondence exists, that's lovely, but if it doesn't come here to us in the form of a resolution, we can't do anything about it. So the only thing we could do is discuss it today, and then if you want, and we need to put another resolution forward in 2 weeks, we can, but it's pretty hard to know what's what when we don't have anything in front of us.
Yeah, I can't account for that. I don't know the answer to that.
I have a question
go ahead.
for anybody on council. It looks like they're just telling us that somebody's retiring and that they're going to be doing a budget neutral hire. Is that something that we need to even approve?
I don't know. I don't know. But if
So I
it's
don't-
changing grades and stuff, we do.
I don't think he is. I think it's, the resolution's based on the changing of the full-time position to two part-time positions and then notification. Mr. McClure?
Sure.
I may have Mr. Iyer at a little bit of a disadvantage. I had a nice conversation with the district attorney earlier this week about this issue surrounding the county detectives. Both of these plan changes implicate the collective bargaining agreement. The county is the exclusive bargaining agent for the district attorney's office. So these things need to be done in negotiations. We're about to begin negotiations with the District Attorneys Detectives Association. And we're going to meet with District Attorney Barada on Friday to get a sense of what he wants to do moving forward with those negotiations. So what I would suggest is any kind of action requested being taken by council would be a nullity on its face because it would be violative of the collective bargaining agreement, and we wouldn't implement it, and it would potentially end up in litigation, which isn't good for anybody, right? So we're going to work with the district attorney to try to attempt to get his priorities met with respect to his detectives and also keep the taxpayers' interest in mind. Thanks, Bob.
Yes, certainly, and if the executive had an intervening conversation with District Attorney Barada that I was not aware of, I certainly appreciate him interjecting that. But the essence of the request with respect to county detectives and District Attorney Barada's position, I think, subject to whatever conversation he's had with the executive relative to some future meeting, was that if it's budget neutral and there's been an allocation of funds for salary, that it's within the province of the district attorney to make a determination as to who is paid what and how many people are on staff as detectives.
I think that's beyond our pay grade. So I'm going to stay out of that hornet's nest, but I fully
I didn't mean to
trust yourself,
traverse
and
into one.
I think that you and DA Barada can handle that adeptly away from us. And if it needs to come back to us later, we're not going anywhere.
I understand, and with the representations of the executive, it appears that there's going to be some discussions regarding that. And and again, I wasn't privy to those discussions, but the sense that I had was that provided they're budget neutral and that they weren't necessarily matters of collective bargaining, that may be a matter for further discussion, however.
So then,
Okay.
given that you still want the
The resolution to go through for the
The-
district attorneys?
one full-time DA eliminated and the two created, yes?
That's correct. The resolution that you have before you is action that was requested by District Attorney Barada, and we would ask that you consider that favorably.
So then I'll make a motion to move that forward, if there doesn't need to be any more discussion on that.
Okay, move forward. Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions? Anything?
Good luck
Very
with
good.
the rest.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is the reappointments, appointments of the county exec. All right, the first one is the Conservation District Board. Will Carpenter, 224 East Wall Street, Bethlehem, PA, 18018. Mr. Carpenter is being considered for a term to begin July 19th, 2024, and to end December 31st, 2028. Is there any questions?
The only question I have about this is the term end, and I haven't heard from Mr. Gafredo or for the Conservation Board how the transition is going, and what's planned for the transition, because aren't they becoming independent and
The
moving
end of the
away?
year.
So then, if at the end of the year, should that just be till the end of this year? Because once that transition happens, do we still appoint people to that board, or no?
I would say absolutely not. We'd be independent, but then again, I would like to reach out to, go ahead.
Hi. Transition's going well, and it's in the statute for the appointments that the county executive and the county council will continue to appoint board members, and the council will approve them, even after independence.
Okay, thank you. Nicole. Any other questions on Will Carpenter?
Motion to move forward.
Okay, thank you. All right, next one is for reappointment for the former Director, Township Supervisor, Farmland Preservation Board. Reappointment for Roger Angst, 7313 Bath Pike, Bath, PA, 18014. Mr. Angst is being considered for the three-year term to begin July 19, 2024, and to end June 30th, 2027. Any questions?
Motion to move forward?
Okay. All right. A recommendation for appointment for the Lehigh Northampton Transportation Authority. Jarrett Mast, 800 Ferry Street, Easton, PA, 18042. Mr. Mast is being considered for a term beginning July 19, 2024, and to end March 2nd, 2025. Mr. Mast is fulfilling the term previously held by Cordelia Miller, who resigned. Any questions?
Motion to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Recommendation for appointment to Park Recreation and Open Space Advisory Board. Greg Zabrowski, 23 Dewberry Avenue, Bentham, PA, 18017. Mr. Zabrowski is being considered for a term beginning July 19, 2024, and to end March 19, 2025. Mr. Zabrowski is fulfilling a term previously held by John Mauser, who resigned. Any questions?
Motion move forward.
Thank you. All right. That's all the appointments, reappointments from the executive. Okay. Next item on the agenda is review of county council staff, job descriptions, and salaries. I know we had a end date of July 3rd for any documentation that wanted to be sent to me. For the job descriptions and the salaries, I did receive two, and we are going forward as the resolutions in front of us. Any questions or discussion?
Well, it seems that we have to have a discussion because the first resolution has an or. So obviously, we need to make a determination about which
one?
level we want. And then the second one, I know that that was proposed, but I also had a counter proposal on that one to leave it exactly where it is. So I'm not sure how that works. Okay. So given that, based on the discussion, none of these would then move forward tomorrow? Because the way this one is written doesn't give us, the second one is written does not give us the option to leave it alone.
Yeah, the design of the whole packet was just to facilitate the discussion and then, for Tom and the committee to discuss with probably Mr. Spadoni and decide what we're going to move forward with.
Okay.
So it's open to discussion for job description and salaries. If there's any discussion.
As far as the job description, I know that I had submitted a change or two. And on the clerk to council, I've got to find,
Yeah, it's down there in bold, Ms. Hefner. I believe that's a change. Am I correct on that, Heidi?
second page.
There's one on the first, I'm sorry, there's one on the first page and there's one on the second page. They're in bold and underlined.
I don't have that. Oh, yes, okay. The first one is attends all county council meetings. That's the one that I had inadvertently said changed to may, and it should not be may because they must. And then the other ones were at suggestion or advisement. And then communicates with council president regarding office operations. That's something that's just been a matter of practice over the years, but this just puts it in there. Because people ask questions about that, and they've always gone to myself and the other presidents about who's taking vacation, who needs to go on leave, simple matters, so. Those were the two that I proposed for that one. For the deputy,
That should be on the second page.
again, when this was created, we did it pretty quickly. And the issue were requirements. Under education, there was bachelor's degree or associates with major coursework. And then it said, and 4 years experience, but now it says, or 4 years equivalent experience. So, again, that's up for discussion, but sometimes there are people that come in with the experience but may not have the requisite degrees. So, it's a discussion that's up for, I'm not married to it, but it's up for discussion. And then, given that, my suggestion for the pay grade was 81,541 for the deputy, because the question had been raised, being that the salary is at the grade that it is, and it seemed like such a big jump. When we made this the first time, we created it, we learned from the pay study that nobody else in the entire county was at that grade, so we put it up to 3, or it's either 3 is where it starts or 4. So I felt that that way you don't have that huge jump. It's still high, but it's not glaring. So that was my motivation for what I suggested.
Okay, any response or questions back to Ms. Hefner about that? Go ahead, John.
Yeah, in looking at this, Lord, I would support the, for the, I'm not sure, I got the deputy clerk to council, the 81,541 would be my leaning. And then on the other resolution, we were discussing the full-time clerk to council pay grade. I would support leaving it where it is currently at the 107,482 and not downgrading the salary from there.
Okay, thank you,
Just
John.
for feedback.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any other comments, questions?
I just think it's important to determine the clerk's salary before we do the deputy clerk. So if we're going to have a consensus on that, then we can have a better understanding of what we want to do with the salary for the deputy clerk in order to shorten that gap between the two.
I think that's
Agreed.
fairly fair. Okay, do we want to move, any other conversation, discussion? All right, do we want to move the county clerk's salary forward as 107,482?
I want to give Mr. Kapoor a chance to just discuss his thoughts, because you did propose an alternative. I don't know that I'd waver on it, but I do want to give you the,
Yeah, when I sent my correspondence, it was just a matter of, because what we were going through in terms of the pay, for the goal was to ensure that the deputy clerk to the clerk, if that were to happen, this continuity of the office, then we needed to decide what we were going to do with that. So I proposed 2 different salary schedules, both of them here, and I'm okay with either, with the goal being to ensure that it's not a huge jump going from the deputy to the clerk, if that's what we choose to do in the future. Not that it's a done deal, but if that is going to be that continuation, then the salary should not be such a dramatic jump in pay scale. That was my concern, so I just wanted to ensure that that was done.
The 107,
Correct.
correct. 107,482 for the clerk.
well, I would obviously, I prefer to keep the salary where it is at the step 1A in group 6, because that's where it is, it's always been in group 6. But again, I just want to move that other one up to at least, I think it should be group 4. Because if it's only 1, 2, 3, 4 that are really operational, and if groups 1 and 2, as per the pay scale, are not being utilized by anyone else in the county, then let's just do 4 and 6. And that's my proposal.
Okay. Mr. Kapoor, are you okay with that?
Yes. Motion to move forward.
Right. All right,
Motion to move forward then on those.
Yeah.
You're allowed to talk. This is where you talk about it.
I've been here for almost 2 years. It's still understanding the steps and the 2s and the 6s and the 4s. I'm looking at it from just a number standpoint and seeing the salary where it's at now being at 107, it is towards the top of the salaries in the county out of everybody. I believe it's close to what the executive makes. I believe it's one of the higher salaried positions. If we go there, and currently we're talking Aileen's in this position, I hope Aileen stays in this position. Aileen's young, has lots of time here, hopefully in the county. Where do we go from there? Where do we keep raising the bar? I think the pragmatic approach would be going to the 89,045. It's a substantial raise from her current position or her former position, and it gives her room to grow in that position. And I think that would be in line with where she should be. I think Mrs. Zembo, who was here for 25 years or whatever it was, she worked her way up to that position as well. And I don't think the position is paying the same to everybody. I think it's something that Ms. Zembo earned to get to that position. And I think Ms. Shafinsky will earn that as well, but within time. So I'd be in favor of seeing the salary to 89. And as far as the deputy, I'd be open to more discussion. I'm not feeling strongly towards one or the other. But if the position is currently 51, we're looking at essentially a 50% raise just to get to 74, which I think is also very substantial. So I'm in the position of 74 and 89 are very fitting. I also want to see both these women earn as much as possible. So I'm trying to take the personal feelings out of it and just looking at it as a number standpoint.
My only counter to that would be, Mike, I'm so sorry, is that something else that was talked about is that there are 8 steps, right? And Ms. Zembo received raises, because it wasn't at 107.4. That's where it is now, after how many years? We could ask her where she started. But that was just with COLA, that she didn't get a step increment until almost 2 or 3 years ago after 25 years of working here, because no one ever raised her steps. So she left here at 2B.
We have that. That's fully within the council's authority, correct?
Right, but
And
no
at the end of the
council
day-
had done that before. And so
I'm just
there's
looking
room
at-
to grow, but it could grow up to 8 steps, as could anybody.
And I think it's 6 and 1/2 dozen the other. At the end of the day, what they're taking home is the important part. And if it was COLA that got her there, or if it was step increases, the fact that she was getting paid $107,000, I think is a very fair salary. I think it looks good on council to pay our people fairly. Doesn't really matter how she got there. But the point that I'm making is, and no offense to Ms. Shafinsky at all, Ms. Zembo was here for a significantly long time, and I think it was her right to earn those wages. But I don't think it is the right of the position to be worth that amount from day one. And if Ms. Shafinsky doesn't get that job and somebody else comes in here making that amount of money, I don't think that's fair to people that worked here for a much longer period of time and would be earning less in other positions of the same caliber.
And I again disagree that it's the step that it's on, and the placement is at group 6. And that's where that position has been. So whether it was at 50 or whatever, she, he, they, whoever takes that position comes in at that spot. And I don't want to downgrade council's clerk's position below where it is, because I think it's important enough. I think the job is responsible. They are the face of council. They are the one person that has to deal with 9 bosses, where nobody else in the county has to do that. And you made the comment about the executive's position. That, again, is something that we had some level of control over as council, but the executive themselves has the right to veto that, and has in the past. So, I proposed that that be a much higher salary, and that was pushed back. So it settled on the 105, and that was a negotiated thing. So council can raise that at any time, and again, we haven't. The current executive was not amenable to a salary increase. They wanted to keep themselves where they were, but we can do that at any time too. So, but everybody else in the county at a higher level position is at that step. And I know the term is clerk, and I think everybody just assumes, well, they're a secretary. I don't see the clerk of council as a secretary. And I think we know what Ms. Zembo did, because she's the one that we knew. I didn't know Mr. Flisser, but I understand that his handling of the job was a little bit different than what Ms. Zembo's was. And I think Ms. Shafnisky, if she retains this position, or whoever we choose to hire, may have a different lens on how this position operates. And I don't just see it as a secretary.
Well, I don't either. I don't see many secretaries getting paid $90,000. That's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the number. I think the steps are arbitrary. I think we have the position and the ability to raise it whenever we see fit. And like I said, just my personal opinion. So everybody gets to have a 2 cents on it. That's just where I'm at.
anything else?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Keegan.
So how does one go from 1A to 2B? Like what, I don't understand it because
How the steps go.
how do you, like every year in the school, we go up a step.
Correct.
How, if Linda was on one step for so long, why? Like, don't you get an evaluation every year and then you get a raise?
I can't answer to what happened before me, so why is a hard question to answer? But what happened for me was hearing that the steps hadn't been adhered to in many departments and realizing that our staff had not had a step increment. And so I made the motion because I was here and I could. So my guess is that's council's purview. And if you, just like any other manager in the system, do you choose to offer a step or do you not? And I guess it's up to management. And then I guess it goes along with their budget as well. So I don't know, like council's unique in that we control our staff salaries. Everybody else has a budget. We have a budget too, but we have that latitude. I'm not sure what other managers here practice, but it's not like a school district where you get your steps. You sometimes get your steps and a COLA, and it's every year, or you can move over and you could get more credits and steps. It's not like that here. That was one of the points that came out in the pay study, that the step guide should be revisited, and why is it not being enforced the way it is? So the only thing that I knew how to do was enforce it here, because that's what we had control over, for our staff only.
I agree with Mr. Goffredo, but then you made good points. So you don't want to downgrade it if that's what this position gets hired at. I could see that point. You know, you wouldn't want to go backwards, but I do see Mr. Goffredo's point. It's a tough situation.
And as far as the pay, like, again, that's a personal issue, that if we want to start looking at that down the road, or if Mr. Heckman wants to address that in Finance Committee, like, why don't we do steps here in the county is a bigger question for another day, I think. It would require a little bit more research. If you have information that I don't, sure.
Just the general process is that we are not guaranteed steps. We get a raise the same way everybody else in the county does, so whether it's just a COLA or, sometimes he does give a step and then everybody moves up one. But yeah, because of the size of our office, we kind of operate in our own little bubble, so for us to go from one step to the other does require the approval of council every time that happens. So it's something that council has to go out of the way to do if it's not just a step that's included in the budget as a raise.
So we just don't think about it until one day someone says, oh, let's talk about increasing a step. It's just, it's really bizarre for me.
You know, other organizations have different ways that they do it. Like where I work, you have to go through a whole performance evaluation. You have to get numbers, you get ratings, you have to go through a process yourself, your boss, back and forth, and then the numbers dictate the percentage that you get. So you have to kind of earn it. So again, if there's something that you want to look at to create a process within the office, again, that's fine down the road. And I don't see that as problematic, but as long as it's fair and reasonable, but like I know when I go to work what I'm getting, because I know what I did, I know what they think of what I did, and it's a whole ordeal.
Yep. Okay.
So what do you have? Did we do a motion and a second, or no?
Mr. Kapoor moved it forward at 107, but again, like I say, I think after our meeting, we'll talk to Spadoni, see how we get it put on the agenda for tomorrow night.
So it would be
Wording.
107 and 89045 for the second position, correct? They'd go together? Oh, no.
No.
It would
It's
be
107, 482.
81,541.
Right, correct. For the deputy. for a deputy clerk.
What we can also do is we can prepare these resolutions blank. And then if you want to take motions tomorrow night, so long as Mr. Spadoni approves of the process, we can certainly do that as well.
Mr. Solicitor, what do you think?
The process is counties. You can leave it blank, and council can move forward with what they'd like to do by 5 votes.
All right, and I think, does everybody agree with that?
Fair.
Person? Everybody agreeable?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the way we'll do it. That's the way we push it forward. Any other discussion on those subjects?
Just a question,
Also,
if,
with the language of the positions, that needs a motion as well.
that was my, question. But does anybody have any further discussion on that or concerns about that? Because now that everybody's had time? Nope. Okay.
All right, we'll move that.
Motion to move forward, well, can I motion if I may be amended? Motion to move both job descriptions forward as amended?
No problem. All right, we'll put them, it'll be on the agenda for tomorrow night. With that being said, I call for an adjournment, no, unless there's some other business that we need to be done with personnel.
We just motioned that.
All right, I'll accept, this committee be over, I adjourn.
Do you need that motion?
Need a motion.
There you go.
All right, thank you.
The Finance Committee Chair's not here. Who's on the Finance Committee?
I am, Mr. Heckman asked me to chair.
Okay.
We'll call the Finance Committee meeting to order here, and first and foremost, courtesy of the floor, is there anybody that would like to speak to the Finance Committee? Not seeing anyone. First agenda item is discussion regarding the bond financing ordinance. I see that we do have a presentation here. Mr. Barron, feel free.
The county council, I had requested this be put on the agenda. I'm going to give this time to Mr. Emili and a gentleman from Skanska who put together the appraisals. The questions that were laid out in the ordinance were not so much the information and the how the debt is paid, but how we came to our numbers related to how much to borrow and the not to exceed numbers that are in the ordinance and presented by PFM. So we're going to have a presentation by Skanska to go over how those numbers were arrived at. And tomorrow, PFM will be here to answer any other questions you may have related to the bond if it comes up off the table. Okay.
Great, thank you. All right. Mr. Emili, feel free.
Sure. So good afternoon, everyone. In response to some of the questions that were raised at the last council meeting where this was discussed, decided it'd be a good idea to invite Gary Warren. He is a program executive with Skanska. He was also our main point of contact as the construction manager when the forensic center was being built. So Gary can kind of walk you through how the cost estimate was derived for this, as well as some of the issues that may arise if we decided to construct a garage with the intention of constructing the building at a later date. So with that, I'd like to introduce Gary Warren.
Good afternoon, everybody. So just to start off, as Mike had said, Gary Warren with Skanska. Skanska is a worldwide builder. We mainly focus on construction management within the U.S. operation, doing all types of projects. Our local office is in just outside of Philadelphia in Blue Bell. So we support this region doing various things. As Mike had said, we were the construction manager as agent doing the forensic center. And we work all throughout Pennsylvania in the Mid-Atlantic market doing similar services, providing pre-construction support, similar to what we're here tonight talking about or this afternoon, as well as boots on the ground oversight during construction to support our clients. So I know this went through prior. The budget that was developed and shared with Mike and team was based on the document that was put together by USA Architects during that feasibility study. And, that contemplated demoing the existing garage, adding approximately 350 spaces, and then the 30,000 square foot office building. So just some insight on what we do, as I had mentioned before, we build projects across the country. Our pre-construction team aggregates all that information into a database called Skanska Metrics. And the reason I bring this up is it's real-time data that we can leverage to help out at a very conceptual level as projects are conceptualized, to be able to come to terms with potentially what those projects could cost. So there's a number of attributes that come into play as we estimate, and we not only just provide oversight similar to Northampton Forensic Center, where the county would hold the contracts and hire the prime contracts depending on the delivery method, but we also are constructors ourselves. So a lot of this information is parking garages, office buildings that we've built throughout the country that are in this database that allows us to pull that real-time data that is accurate, that is as-built data, and leverage that so we can provide some accurate information. And the last thing is just the anticipated schedule. So this is, extremely important when we talk about anything in the future. We know it's going to cost more tomorrow than it is going to cost today. So that comes into play, especially the market and the world we live in, and how volatile everybody understands it is, whether it's your personal life or when it relates to construction and how that impacts projects as we move forward. So, obviously in the documents that were shared and working with Mike and team, that was the anticipated schedule, which is important because all that cost data that we have is then taken real time or whenever that was developed and escalated to the midpoint of construction. This schedule contemplated about a 22-month schedule, so it's about 11 months into construction. So these numbers that you're seeing on the screen with what we call option one, the full build, is the full garage as well as that 30,000 square foot office building. So just to kind of walk through, we know there's the demolition of the existing garage. We know there's the parking garage expansion, which that's somewhat of that is the portion of direct construction costs. We know there's going to be some site development, that's the excavation, that's some of the foundation systems and other items that is needed to support that structure as well as get out of the ground. There's the office building, the core and shell. We broke it out. The core and shell is the frame of the building, the enclosure, everything except the interior fit out. And the last line is that interior fit out. That totaled about $36.5 million. And what was also added into that budget was some of the owner costs. And I'm just going to jump ahead. A lot of people, when we budget these costs and they ask us and they look at the numbers and they say, why are you adding so much below the line cost? There's a bunch of other things that have to be understood when you look at these projects from an owner standpoint. There's contingencies, things that you may run into, whether it's environmental, it's getting out of the ground, maybe you hit some rock or unknown utilities. There's insurances, builder's risk, some of those things that need to be put in place to develop commercial projects. There's third-party testing and inspection, there's utility fees, there's your furniture, fixture, and equipment that goes into the building. There's your professional services, AE, CM, however it's contemplated to deliver the project, and then any permit costs. So those are just some typical things that we wanted to highlight, that you look at that number at the bottom, that $6 or $7 million, and it seems like it's a large figure, but it's all those other ancillary costs, whether it's professional services or whatever it is, that needs to be factored in. So option one, when we talk about the full build, that garage as well as the office building, was about that $43 million number that we had identified as the budget based on the information we have currently. Any questions there? So I brought it up before. The market has been extremely volatile over the last couple of years. A lot of this started with COVID, and I know this is somewhat of an eye test, but we measure.
That's an eye test.
We measure and track our own cost index, and really what this is all about is tracking on a monthly basis, how the market and what goods are going to cost, as well as labor, each year. And we've been averaging, historically, the 10-year average has usually been around, that 3 to 4%. And as you can see in there, 2021, 2022, there were some major blips. You saw 13% in 2021, another 9%. And it certainly steadied. We're right around 4.2%. We're probably on track to be
Really
about
quick,
that.
Sorry to interrupt. As I'm trying to read this here, I'm 47 years old now, getting older. The eyes aren't what they used to be.
Yeah.
The third to the last blue column, what does that say? What is that?
Right here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's 10-year? Okay, thank you.
So, and what I'm really just trying to get out of this is, as we look at some of these other options and we look in the future, we saw in 2023 about 4.2% escalation. We're on track to do somewhat of that similar amount this year, maybe a little bit under that. So it's going to come into play as we walk through some of these additional scenarios. But I just wanted to bring this up as we look at some of these situations and we start projecting these budgets long-term and try to understand what the cost is. Even if it's, the design remains the same, and you kind of move through, there is going to be incremental costs that we're going to have to account for, which is this whole escalation. And I can walk through that a little bit more as it relates to a couple different options I'm going to go through. So I went through option one that you can see on the left-hand side of the screen. So we put together a couple other options. One is, well, what if you built just the garage only? You can certainly design this and build this garage. I mean, it's done all the time to specifically only account for those 350 spaces. It may be a little bit different than what was conceptualized with the USA and the feasibility study, but it's certainly feasible to do that. So what we did is we broke down that cost. We kind of refigured the owner cost, and that gets you to a total project cost around $22 million, just for perspective. So that would just be 350 spaces. There's no office, no supporting spaces. It would just be physically the garage. That may not look and feel, what was previously presented, but it's certainly a feasible possibility in the future. And then option three is, well, what if we built a garage similar to option two and similar to option one, but we waited and we deferred the construction of the office for 2 years? What does that do? Just a, scenario when we talk about, what I was just talking through with escalation. So, there's certainly a couple implications that I can go through on the next slide if that was to happen with some difficulties. It's obviously a tight site. Everybody has walked by it a number of times, kind of sits in a hole, fairly tight. Nothing is, nothing, or that certainly can be done. It's going to offer its challenges that needs to be factored in, and we did factor in some of those additional costs and situations that we know we'd run into if that was the case. The big thing that's going to do is if you shift the office construction 2 years, and I go back to that initial slide and when we talk about escalation, we escalate things to the midpoint of construction, which was about that 22 months. So I know there's a lot of numbers here. If you deferred it 2 years, you would push that midpoint of construction another essentially 40 months, right? So you'd build the garage, 2 years later, you go through another redesign, you put it out on the street, you go get contractors, then you build that. That would move that midpoint 40 months. So as you look into the office line items here, and we can certainly share this because I know it's a lot of information to digest, that's where you start seeing those escalation premiums outside of some of the other complications that we would see if you did this after the fact. That's what's really going to drive the number. So whether it's related to the construction cost, a little bit more on the owner cost, you'd obviously prolong additional design services, kind of the whole the whole 9 yards that would be related to this project. That would push us into something into the 48 million, which would be an increase of 5 to 6 million is what we're showing there because of those factors. And similar to what I was just going through, the big thing that we see, it's certainly feasible to only build a garage, but if you're looking at future considerations to have an office, there's a lot of planning and design for that future addition that have to be understood. So certainly there's going to be complications with that. Tight site logistics, how you build a garage and then build another foundation system next to that. We see it in cities all the time. There's, tremendous amount of work that has to be done to be able to build immediately adjacent. It's certainly feasible. It's just a consideration that I put out there when we look at those costs, and some of that was certainly factored in why we're seeing those premiums. And then it's just operational impacts. It's a tight site. You're down in depression, how you access the site, how you use that parking garage. That's something that you're not going to get full use of that garage, especially if you're bolting on an addition. That just has to be factored in addition of how it may lay out. I know the feasibility study that was presented had some level of parking underneath the office. Obviously, you're going to lose some of that, and that has to be figured in, as we work through, some of these solutions. And then I identified some of that future cost. So just, a few considerations to have to walk through a couple of scenarios. There's certainly a million different things that you can look at, but just to work through some of those and provide a number so you can have some context. Any questions?
Yeah, how is the, in terms of the professional services, how is the, say, the civil engineering going to be taken care of? Do you all take care of that? Are we going to be taking care of that here at the county?
So Skanska is just there was a construction management RFP, but Skanska, even with Northampton Forensic, we're just the construction manager. So the architect and engineer would do all the design services, including the civil.
Right. Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions?
And just so you know, all that cost was carried in that owner cost line item.
Right. Okay.
Just, do we have a hard copy of this presentation?
I can get it to Mike so it can be shared.
And can you alter those numbers so that they're readable by older eyes?
Yes, I think when you see the presentation,
That's kind of a joke and it's kind of not.
it's much clearer when you can see it on your screen, so we can certainly share that.
250 plus.
Any other questions? All right. Thank
Great.
you. Thank you for taking the
problem.
time to provide the presentation.
Absolutely.
to us. Next on the Finance Committee agenda is the review of the Administrative Code, Article 8, Contact Resolution, William R. Schultz Incorporated. Get that out really quick. Is there any questions from the Finance Committee or anyone else here on council with regard to this? No?
Well, I guess I do have questions. I guess it's Mr. Mealy. Do we own this building, or we're just doing it because we rent?
Yeah, Mr. Mealy, if you don't mind, I think Ms. Vargo Hefner has a question with regard to the contract resolution.
Sure. So this is for a kitchen renovation project at the Nazareth Senior Center. The Human Services Area on Aging, they received a grant a little while back to help pay for the majority of these costs. I know we bid it once previously in the spring. We only received one bid. It came in pretty high, so we rebid it. And this time the bids came in much better with Schultz as the low bidder.
Yes.
Did anything change in the scope from the rebid?
No, it did not.
How much lower, if round numbers, you don't have to be exact?
It was roughly 100,000, I think, lower this time.
Just goes to show how the value of multiple bids.
Any other questions from council?
Thank you.
All right, Finance Committee is going to adjourn.
$100,000, like $100,000 higher than that? So it was 238 for the original bid?
Do we need to reset for governance, or? Okay, I need a 5-minute break so that we can reset the recording system.
So that's kind of, it's. Kelly, I was just telling Lori, another thing about our system is that every other department has the discretion to give a single step raise to any employee. We don't have that option. Our only way to get a step is to come before council and have a vote.